vaccine. They were most protected. They were second most protected. They were third most protected. They didn't say if there was a group that was even more protected who'd had the infection and the vaccine, or the vaccine and the infection. They didn't study that, so that's all we know. But 3 doses of vaccine giving greater protection, at least for the time scale that the vaccination programme has been on in the UK, which is all comparatively recently, of course, the booster dose vaccine in the UK, the third dose of vaccine in the UK, providing more protection than natural immunity, which is interesting. That's not telling us about severe disease, of course, it's just telling us about symptomatic infection, but really we're more interested in severe disease, but it's interesting nonetheless. Omicron compared to Delta, compared to one of the original Wuhan strains of the virus, particular mutant from Wuhan. Titers of Omicron vary in the lung tissues. We're at least an order of magnitude lower at each time point compared to the other two variants. So what they did was they followed the infection through a period of time, and always throughout the evolution of the infection, as the body was getting rid of the infection, there was always 10 times less virus in the lungs compared to the wild Wuhan, or the original Wuhan type and the Delta type. At least 10 times less virus in the lung. So that's very encouraging, because less virus in the lung, we believe, will lead to less pneumonia. Now, this doesn't automatically follow, because the virus in the upper passages could lead to a systemic inflammatory response that could cause a cytokine storm, but it doesn't seem to be doing that. It seems that a lot of this inflammatory effect is localized. So the presence of the virus in a particular place is what causes the inflammation of the virus in that particular place. So the virus in Delta, for example, is present in the lungs, therefore the inflammation occurs in the lungs, therefore patients get pneumonia, they get the acute respiratory distress syndrome. And because of the microscopic distances between the lungs and the blood vessels, in people with pneumonia who have inflammation in the lungs, it's only the tiniest couple layers of epithelial, endothelial cells thick, absolutely microscopic distances to get through, and you're in the blood. And then, of course, that could account for the problems in the blood vessels, the problems in the heart, problems in other organs as well. It could also account for some of the thrombotic changes that occur around about the lungs as the virus leaks from the lungs into the adjacent capillary and small vessel network into the venules, and then after going around the circulation into the arterioles in the lungs. So it is looking like the inflammation is localized. So this is, so again, not necessarily the case, but it's looking like it. So that's looking favourable, that less viruses in the lungs therefore likely get pneumonia. This is consistent with attenuated replication of Omicron in lower respiratory tissues, as recently reported. In other words, all of these studies that we've looked at are all singing from the same hymn sheet. There are no studies, and I have looked, well, I've done quite a few Google searches and Google Scholar searches and things. There are no studies saying that Omicron causes more severe lung infection than bronchial infection, none. All the studies that we have, and we looked at about half a dozen there, are all showing that it's more of an upper airway infection, less likely to cause severe lung disease, consistent with the features that we are now seeing in 75% of people who have colds in the UK have a COVID cold in the UK, according to the latest Zoe symptom tracker data. So if you do have a cold and you've got testing facilities available, do test, find out if you've got it. Then you can take precautions to not infect vulnerable people. And also it can be pretty interesting to know if you've had it anyway, because if you have had Omicron, as we saw yesterday, you are going to be, I can't say immune, but you're going to have a high level of protection against a future Omicron infection. And you also have a high level of protection against Delta. So if you've had Omicron, you are going to have a high level of protection as well. The Omicron will stimulate a good level of protection against Delta, which is why I believe Delta will go away, as we saw yesterday. So the science is fairly good. I'm going to do a bit of a crunch on the numbers tomorrow. There's nothing that's causing great alarm at the moment. The main problem just now is so many, in hospitals, for example, there's so many people off sick. So many people are self-isolating because of the current isolation rules. This is what's causing states of States, what do you call it? States of, not states of emergency, whatever you call it when hospitals are somewhat overburdened. Yeah, state of emergency, I think. Anyway, it's largely because so many people are off sick or having to isolate is the problem, rather than being totally inundated with COVID patients. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. If the numbers change, we'll report it straight away, of course, but so far, and the reason I've wanted to do quite a bit of science over these past 3 days is to show that the science is continuous with the data out of South Africa, the provisional data from the United Kingdom, and the data that is going to be coming out of the United States over the next week or 2. Thank you for watching.
Покупайте.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. We are going to do a tutorial of Czerny's Study in E-flat Major, Opus 139, number 49. There's a lot of Czerny studies and a lot of different numbers. As with all tutorials, I'm going to be playing through this piece so you can kind of follow along, get a feel for it, and we're going to talk some of the details. So some of the details in this piece that particularly stand out are is the Alberti bass pattern. It's got some finger pedaling. We're going to talk details like what key it's in, and we're going to talk about beautiful phrasing. So let's get started. It's a great idea to learn etudes and studies on the piano because they teach you really specific skills, the kind of things that you would develop if you were playing things like scales and arpeggios and stuff like that. But they're more interesting to play than scales because it's actually a piece. Some composers like Chopin believed it was better to do etudes and just kind of like forego doing any scales and exercises like that, although other composers like Liszt was a big adherent to practicing scales and stuff, so depends on your school of thought. I think both have value in their own way. We've done Czerny playthroughs on this channel before at a beginner level, and you might want to check those out if you're new to Czerny. The awesome thing about Czerny, and the reason that I like to pretty much consistently reapproach him from beginner level to intermediate to advanced, is because he was a teacher and wrote a ton of material for all ages and levels of students. And his music and his studies are really valuable for building skills at any level. So before we get to the playthrough in just a moment here, let's spend like 30 seconds talking about the backstory of this piece. So really quick Czerny primer. He was a student of Beethoven's. He kind of straddled the late classical, early romantic era, but he's by all intents and purposes a classical composer. And he was a very successful and lucrative teacher. The study we're looking at today is from his collection called 100 Progressive Studies, Opus 139. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a collection of 100 short etudes. Most of them are very short, and they range in difficulty from pretty much a beginner level all the way through like an intermediate level. And if you're looking for studies and technique builders and stuff like that, you might want to check out this entire collection as opposed to just like this one single piece from it. Anyway, let's have a listen.
Отличие богатых людей от бедных в мышлении. Есть Костя и Миша. 1 марта 2020 года у каждого из них было по 100 тысяч рублей. Костя купил iPhone 12 Pro, а Миша же перевел эти деньги в валюту и получил $1500. Далее он покупал акции компании по $63 за акцию и получил 24 акции в свой актив. Далее, уже через полгода, iPhone потерял в цене 20%. А акции компании выросли до $129 за штуку. Миша продал их и получил $3096. А после конвертации в рубль по курсу 73 рубля за доллар, в итоге он забрал 226 тысяч и 8 рублей. Если ты хочешь хорошо разбираться в теме инвестиций, стать финансово свободным и хорошо зарабатывать,
Hi everyone, my name is Jaser and I've played the piano for 18 years. And in this 18 years I have made a lot of mistakes. If I could go back in time I would do things pretty differently. So in this video I'm going to share with you 7 things I would do differently. I want to save you the months and painful years of figuring out these mistakes so that you have a much nicer and smoother experience learning piano. I'm going to start from number 7 and work my way all the way to the most important thing, number 1, at the very end. So make sure you watch this video until the very end. Number 7 is to learn more music theory, and I think it's really important to learn more music theory because learning more music theory means you're going to get a lot better at sight reading, because when you learn music theory, what you're learning is a whole bunch of scales and key signatures, arpeggios, time signatures, and all these things, they just really help you to see music with quite a different lens. I'm going to use the Mozart C major sonata as an example. If I had lots of music theory knowledge, I could first see that the right hand, that first 3 notes there is just a C major triad chord, right? And the left hand is a bunch of Alberti basses. So that's a C major, and that's the 5/7 inverted, okay? And the chord 4, so chord 4, 1. So when you have a good deal of music theory knowledge, you start to be able to chunk information and you stop to see music as individual notes, but groups of information that you can then process and play much, much faster. So when you see someone sight read a really complicated and amazing piece, and they do it really, really well, it's not so much that they are really good at computing and playing many, many individual notes, but it's more that what's happening in the brain is they have played that particular group of notes or that cluster of notes so many times that in their minds they're just performing one thing. So I've never learned this piece officially before, but before this video I took about half an hour just to study and analyze this piece. So this is kind of half sight reading and half practice for me. So if you look at this one, so I want to share with you, right, what's going on in my head. Play this. I'm not actually thinking about these notes as individual, like D, B, D, G, B. I'm not quite thinking about that. I'm more actually chunking it all into sort of one thing, but they're just broken up. That's a G chord, right? C chord. The different chords. G chord again. Even that. So for me to see this happen, all I see is the A minor chord, but it's just got this grace note before it, right? That's the main bit, but it's got a grace note in there, so. So number 6 on the list of things I would tell my younger self to do would be not to only practice it until I get it right, but more to practice something until I can't get it wrong.
Знакомьтесь с умным браслетом QIWI-Wallet, который поможет контролировать.
So this is quite a rookie mistake that lots of people think until I can't get it wrong. So this is quite a rookie mistake that lots of people make. They play something many, many times wrong, and they sort of get one time finally after an hour. They finally got it right, and they think, oh, awesome, I finished my job. But it's not quite so simple. It's if you've got it wrong 99 times and you've got it correct one time on your 100th time, well, statistically when you're on stage, you're more likely to still stuff up because you played 99 times wrong and only one time correct, right? So it's quite important to play it many times correctly. So this is something that I tell a lot of my students. Practice until you can't get it wrong. Okay, going to number 5 is I would stop using so much pedal during my practice. I think pedal is really good for certain pieces of music. When you use it in performances, it's very effective. But when you're practicing, it's better just to not use it and just focus a little more on clarity. Okay, that's very important. When you take away the pedal, it makes your music very naked, and that's better because then you can see which areas you need to improve on. Because the thing
Все умрет. Что Нет, ну вот это есть самое. Подожди, ребята, что? Эй! Ну это есть он самый, типа, да, ну нет, ну да. Наоборот, да. Ну тут я думаю сам. Нет, ну да, нет. Ну на. Ну да. Ну нет. Может нет. Ну это. Good.
идете и говорите, я продаю по рынку. Что это значит?
Hello, I'm Graham Fitch, coming to you from Steinway Hall in the centre of London, and I'm here for Pianist magazine talking about weak fingers. Of course, if you think about the hand, we've got the strong fingers on the insides, the thumb and the second finger and the third finger. Yes, they are stronger than the fourth and fifth finger, but it doesn't mean to say that there's anything wrong with that situation. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how we can make the pinky and the fourth finger actually feel really good and strong without doing exercises to supposedly strengthen them. I'm not a great believer in these exercises that's supposed to strengthen fingers, because actually our fingers are strong enough already to play the piano. What we need to do is to remember a few key points about alignment and rotation and arm involvement. Rather like if you think about running. We don't run with our feet only, do we? So we run with our body, and the feet happen to be on the end of the body, the contact of the body with the floor. And it would be ludicrous to do exercises to strengthen the foot in order to run. But a lot of pianists think, oh, I need to strengthen my fourth and my fifth finger, and they sit there for hours doing exercises that are actually going to make it worse, certainly won't improve it. Now, here's an exercise that you're going to find, this type of exercise you'll find in any book of technical exercises. This happens to come from Jeffrey Tankard and Eric Harrison's book, Piano Technique on an Hour a Day. First of all, that's much too long. I wouldn't do an hour a day. And I'm not saying I wouldn't, there isn't value in these exercises, but let's look at it. I'll show you right hand. And then down, the similar. But if you can see really closely what I'm doing, you will discover that I'm doing two things. One is I'm aligned on my third and my fourth and my fifth finger. My arm is behind those three fingers, as opposed to this sort of position, which is a thumb alignment. So we want alignment on the third and the fourth and the fifth finger. Now another thing I'm doing, which to me is second nature, is to rotate into the key rather than lift my finger from here. So I'm avoiding lifting my finger from the main knuckle, and instead
Да плавно играть, плавно. Да, вот это есть. Вот это и есть. Ну вот это и есть, да. Скажи, что такое?
can show you how to go from 0 to mastering the piano up to 150 times faster.
All this is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So this is the last day for this year. We will miss Betty White. May she rest in peace. Happy New Year to everyone. There was a very common question for a few days that how are there was a rest in peace. We will miss Betty White. May she rest in peace. How are unvaccinated faring in the time of Omicron? And before folks become emotional about it, that somehow I am giving a bad news to unvaccinated, I think it is the reason folks who are not vaccinated have been asking is to understand how do they take care of themselves and how much they should be careful. So I think this is important data for them to understand how we can keep ourselves protected. So this data is interesting. And John Snyder, thank you very much. Sorry, John, thank you very much for sharing this link. This is the data is from South Africa. This is their research letter to JAMA, and that is what I'm going to share with you and some data from there. I think it is very interesting data. There is a lot of positive news in there. But generally, the summary is that unvaccinated have a little more severity of the disease, but higher percentage, more unvaccinated have severe disease compared to unvaccinated. That is a basic summary. So let's see the data. So quick references. This is drbeen.com. Then here, this is the study that John shared, and thank you, John, very much for this. Characteristics and outcomes of hospitalized patients in South Africa during the COVID-19 Omicron wave compared with previous waves. This is very, very interesting, compared with the previous waves. So, of course, this data is pertinent to South Africa. It is probably not able to be put one-to-one for other communities. So, it is interesting to see it. But I don't think it is interesting enough to say this is exactly how this would happen in other places. I think you realize that. The tables in this study are very, very interesting to look at. I'm going to walk you through those, but it will be fun if you just do it on your own too. Then here is the current wave, and if you see this wave is almost over. This here as well, the wave is almost over, and that is amazing. I love it. So now let's start. I also have the letter. This is a letter, research letter. I also have it over here. I've gone over this and put some data together. We'll go over the tables as well. So let's look at the highlights first. So first of all, Happy New Year. I did this doodle in Rebel. And I am new to Rebel, so there is still some roughness. And I think my artwork generally have that little roughness to it. So anyways, Happy New Year to everyone. Some folks are already in the new year. Some are still going to be having the new year soon. I might come online at 12 p.m. Pacific time, coming severe. In this wave, 2,351 people came in for the treatment, and out of them 41.3% were admitted. So first you can see that a smaller percentage is admitted compared to Delta. Then to those who are admitted, how did they progress, and what is the situation with vaccination and unvaccinated? So let's look at more data here, characteristics further. This is very interesting as well. With this wave, fourth wave, we observed that younger patients were more hospitalized or coming to hospital for treatment. And that can be, for example, younger patients may not have been vaccinated yet, or younger patients may have been a little more open for roaming around, working around, thinking that we would have less severe situation anyways. So there can be more factors, not that just the Omicron is only attacking younger.
Да нет. Вот ты делаешь, на дороге. Очень жаление. Куплен. понимаешь. Да, наоборот, это да. Вот это и Сейчас сказал дизиза. Play well, play well. Да. Хуже не знаю. Надо читать.
So younger patients were more. 36 years was the average age compared to 59 years average age for the previous wave. There were more females this time compared to previous waves. Then this is very interesting, significantly fewer people with comorbidities. And that once again could be because people with comorbidities may have been a little more nervous and had gotten the infection, the vaccine, or some of them had gotten the infection, so they may have been more careful. So again, this discussion is not about the factors, but the data.
Could be cruel.
So significantly fewer with the comorbidities. Then here starts the interesting data. Acute respiratory condition. How bad was it? Were they coming in with the respiratory situation? Were they coming in with the oxygen requirement? Were they breathless? So wave number 3, 91.2% people came in with some respiratory issue, an acute issue, versus this time only 31.6%. So we saw that 2,300 some people came into the hospital. Out of them, about 40% got admitted. And from these people, only 31.6% had the severe or the acute respiratory outcomes, compared to 91% in the previous waves. That's a beautiful number actually, or trend, or behavior of the virus plus the society. So I created these. These charts are not in the original paper, but I created these charts so that we can have a visual analysis of how it is. So here the red one is the previous wave and acute respiratory outcome, or people in the acute respiratory state when they came to the hospital, versus this wave, the green one, and you can see 91% versus 31%. Beautiful. Then second part, oxygen requirement. Wave 3, the previous wave, delta wave, 74% of the patients coming to the hospital required oxygen. Wave 4, only 17.6%. This is good news with the new year. So again, a visual representation, oxygen requirement for the wave 3, patients who came to hospital, 74% needed oxygen. Now 17% needed oxygen. You see the difference? Number of admissions, number of people coming to hospital are less. Whatever are the factors, we're not talking about the factors, we're just looking at the dynamics of the society. Number of people arriving at the hospital are less. That means even if there are more cases, they are just being handled outside. Then out of those who are in the hospital, they are less severe. That is the second dynamic. And significantly less severe. 74% requiring oxygen in the last wave versus 17.6% requiring oxygen. Then ICU admission. So within in the South Africa, when the patient is in the hospital, it is not necessary that they directly are in the ICU. They get in the ward, and then if they become more severe, they go to the ICU. So out of those 2,300 people, 901 got admitted. The remaining went back. Those who got admitted, out of them, then how many ended up in the ICU? So previous waves, let's say wave number 3, 29.9% people who were admitted in the hospital ended up in the ICU. This wave, 18.5%. So not a huge difference as we saw with the other metrics, but still a downward trend. Number of people, the cases are more, number of people coming to hospital are less compared to other waves. Then those who are coming for the treatment and then sent back that, hey, just do this, okay. And the ones that are admitted are less. Then the ones who are admitted are less severe. Then whoever are severe from them going to ICU are less as well. And this is a visual representation. Not too much difference, but again, important difference. Then death rate. I haven't talked about vaccine and unvaccinated yet. I'll go there. This is general, regardless of the vaccine status. Wave 1, death rate was 19.7%. Wave 2, this is of the hospitalized patients, not of the ICU count. Wave 2, 29.1%. Wave 4, 2.7%. 2.7%. More cases, less in the hospital. Then whoever are in the hospital, less severe. Then whoever are severe, look at the percentage of death. Almost 10 to 15% reduction in death rate. And this is a visual representation. This wave is the green one, which is almost negligible line here. And then the previous wave, 29%, that is delta. And then the 19.7 is the first wave, that is original ancestor. Here is the vaccine versus unvaccinated. So out of those 2,300 people who arrived in this hospital for treatment, 901 got hospitalized, got admitted. Out of those 901, 24.2% were vaccinated. 66.4% were unvaccinated. So almost 2/3 were unvaccinated.
Вредно, вредно.
And then there was 9.4% whose status was not known, or they didn't find the record, or the record was not updated. 9.4% are in unknown state. That means some of them would be vaccinated, some of them will be unvaccinated, etc.
That's all.
And the definition of vaccination was 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson or 2 doses of Pfizer. So look at this one once more. Out of everyone who is admitted, now there is a question that is not answered. That question is, out of those 2,300 that arrived in the hospital, that came to hospital and said, please see, we have a problem, what was their
Самая лучшая идея.
separation of
Смотрела на
vaccinated
смешно.
versus unvaccinated?
Но
That is not known.
спасти.
But once they were admitted, that is here. So today I was so much, I wanted to call them and say, do you have that data? Because if you have the data for people who are in the hospital, then maybe you have the data who came to hospital and then they